Hey everyone, today we're diving into what happened between Harry and Meghan last night. If you noticed, Harry didn't just seem distant, he looked haunted. And honestly, can you blame him? Meghan's Paris appearance wasn't just another public event. In my opinion, it mirrored one of the most painful nights of his life, the loss of his mother. And now, standing beside her, Harry looked almost like he was reliving that moment, one photo opportunity at a time. Let's take a closer look. Harry's expressions told a story. There was tension in his shoulders, a slight tightness around his eyes, and a kind of distant gaze that suggested he was emotionally triggered. Meanwhile, Meghan's behavior seemed very deliberate. At first glance, her looks might seem affectionate, but if you pay attention, there's a controlling element. She was guiding his movements with her eyes, signaling him subtly without a word. This isn't the first time this has been noticed. Back in Jamaica, when Harry was speaking to the Prime Minister, Meghan attempted to insert herself into the conversation in a very similar way, touching his elbow, leaning slightly, and steering the interaction toward herself. It's subtle, but it's a form of control, a silent way of shaping the environment and dictating the interaction. Then there's Harry's reaction. When Meghan tries to hold his hand during greetings, he often tries to avoid it. He fiddles with his suit, shifts his coat, or adjusts his posture. These small gestures are his way of resisting her attempts at physical or symbolic control. Most people would never notice these micro-moments, but they speak volumes about the dynamic between the two. Even the way he briefly looks away or creates space is telling. It's as if his body is trying to create a boundary that he isn't verbally asserting. Now, let's talk about Meghan's performance of meekness. She often appears calm, soft, or submissive, but it's an act and it doesn't last. Behind the scenes, or even just out of direct view, her mask slips. You can see a momentary smile that doesn't reach her eyes, or a gesture that betrays her controlling tendencies. This isn't just for Harry. It's also for the cameras, for public perception. By pretending to be meek, she creates the illusion that Harry is in control, while she subtly maintains influence. When Harry doesn't introduce her during speeches or events, it's another example of a shift in the dynamic, revealing that her meekness is strategic, not genuine. This kind of behavior is often seen in manipulative dynamics. When someone realizes they've overstepped, the usual response might seem like softness or sweetness, but it's actually a strategic pivot. When a person suddenly becomes tender, gentle, or fragile, it's often a calculated effort to manage perception, control the narrative, and regain influence. Acting meek or apologetic can disarm the other person, making them question their own reactions. Even minor gestures, like tilting her head in a certain way, lowering her voice, or mirroring Harry's expressions, serve as subtle psychological cues. It's about maintaining influence while appearing compliant. Let's break down how this works. Acting meek allows the manipulator to manage their image. They appear misunderstood, innocent, or overly gentle, which can make any reaction from the other person seem exaggerated or unreasonable. Then there's a manipulative contrast. Switching from controlling or harsh behavior to sudden softness creates cognitive dissonance. The target starts questioning themselves, wondering if they overreacted, or if maybe the manipulator is changing. Even while appearing tender, they may deny wrongdoing. They might apologize in a soft tone, but avoid true accountability. This combination keeps the other person off balance and second-guessing their own perception. This phase is often called a mini love bomb phase. When the manipulator senses that the target might pull away or stop responding, they switch tactics. Soft eyes, gentle tone, tears, or sudden overpoliteness can all be tools to regain emotional control. It's not empathy, it's strategy. The goal is to make the other person feel safe enough to reconnect, to lower their defenses, and to reactivate a previous emotional bond. Small gestures, subtle compliments, or temporary sweetness are all designed to achieve that. Manipulation can also happen in very subtle ways. Controlling the narrative matters more than controlling the truth. Even if the target publicly defends them, the manipulator continues to perform meekness to ensure others perceive them in a certain way. Emotional conditioning also comes into play. By appearing fragile, they make the target feel guilty for confronting them, reinforcing the power dynamic. Flipping the dynamic through self-pity turns the manipulator into the wounded party, subtly making the other person the emotional caretaker. Even surface-level actions like small apologies, a kind gesture, or mimicking emotions are all part of this subtle manipulation. Emotional whiplash: the contrast between cruelty and sudden sweetness confuses the target's brain, keeping them invested in trying to make sense of it. What's important to note is that these behaviors are not isolated incidents. They are patterns that repeat over time. Watching closely, you notice microsignals: a hand touch that lingers too long, a gaze that communicates control rather than affection, a small but deliberate shift in posture, or a sudden act of apparent meekness immediately following a controlling gesture. Sometimes, you also notice her attention shifting subtly toward other people, almost to see who is watching or to measure their response. Even how she adjusts her clothing, or the way she positions herself relative to Harry, signals calculated attention to perception. These details, when combined, reveal a clear strategy of influence and psychological manipulation. You can also see how timing plays a huge role. She may wait until Harry is distracted, engaged with someone else, or focused on the cameras to subtly assert herself. The gestures are small, but intentional: the tilt of a shoulder, the positioning of hands, a brief glance that communicate authority or influence without saying a word. Even microsmiles or momentary expressions of satisfaction can indicate that she's measuring his reactions, controlling the flow of attention, and testing boundaries. This adds an additional layer to the performance, showing how nuanced and intentional these interactions can be. So, how can you recognize this manipulation and protect yourself? There are several key signs that the target is no longer falling for the act. They stop reacting with anger or debate. They observe quietly. No leaning in, softening their tone, or seeking approval. They calmly address actions, not debating intent. They set limits without explanation. And they start trusting their own perception, no longer second-guessing themselves. Once the target stops reacting, the manipulator loses their power. Fake meekness no longer works because it relies on engagement. What was once confusing suddenly becomes obvious. It's a rebranding of control, not genuine humility. It's important to understand that being a victim in this context does not mean weak. It means someone was targeted, manipulated, or tested, but they survived. They endured, observed, and reclaimed their voice. That's strength. That's power. And this is why watching interactions between Harry and Meghan can be so instructive. It reveals patterns that most people overlook, subtle tactics that operate beneath the surface, and the ways emotional dynamics can be manipulated for control, perception management, and influence. By recognizing these patterns, anyone can start to protect themselves emotionally, set boundaries, and respond with clarity rather than confusion. The key is observation, patience, and understanding that what appears as kindness, meekness, or sweetness can sometimes be a strategic performance rather than genuine behavior. Awareness is the first step toward regaining control, and that's what makes these interactions so fascinating. Every glance, every gesture, every moment of avoidance or subtle dominance can reveal deeper truths about the dynamic at play. If you watch closely, you start to notice microsignals, the little tells that indicate control, manipulation, or strategy. These details allow someone to understand the pattern, stop reacting emotionally, and begin responding with composure and confidence. The subtle cues, the timing of gestures, even a brief change in tone or a shift in posture can give away the manipulator's true intentions. The takeaway here is clear. Understanding manipulation doesn't just help you interpret public figures. It helps you in your own life. It teaches you to notice subtle tactics, identify emotional games, and reclaim your own perception and boundaries. The victim is not weak. They are the survivor, the observer, the one who sees through the act and refuses to be controlled. Recognizing the difference between strategy and genuine behavior allows someone to stay grounded, emotionally safe, and fully aware of the dynamics around them, no matter how subtle or public they appear. It's a skill that applies in relationships, workplaces, and even casual social interactions, because manipulation doesn't always come in obvious forms. It's often hidden in the smallest gestures, glances, and shifts in behavior.